We are witnessing the most sophisticated, bloodless dismantling of a superpower in modern human history. It is not happening through a grand, apocalyptic kinetic exchange. It is not happening through a sudden, overwhelming invasion. It is happening through mathematics, through geography, and through sheer, unyielding exhaustion. Right now, across three completely different theaters of operation, a synchronized, devastating trap has been sprung. We are looking at an invisible net that is actively bleeding the U.S. military dry, paralyzing its diplomatic alliances, and leaving the vital Indo-Pacific region wide open for a silent, uncontested takeover. But ask yourself, how does a dominant global empire actually fall? Does it collapse in a single dramatic day, or does it slowly bankrupt itself by chasing shadows across the desert, squandering its treasure on unwinnable games of tactical whack-a-mole? Let us look at the hard, unforgiving data, beginning in the narrow, incredibly volatile waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Over the past 12 hours, the U.S. leadership has made a breathtakingly bold, historically unprecedented declaration. They have officially designated the Strait of Hormuz as, quote, new U.S. territory, assuring the international community that all maritime naval mines have been successfully neutralized and that the vital waterway is wide open, completely secure for global commerce. It is a projection of absolute, unshakable authority. It is the language of a hegemon trying to speak reality into existence. There is only one problem with this grand declaration. The empirical data is telling us a completely different, frankly, terrifying story. If we look at the latest real-time satellite tracking from K-Peeler shipping data, we do not see a secure, bustling waterway. We see a ghost town. Total maritime transits through the strait have plummeted by nearly 20% in a matter of hours. Only a tiny handful of heavily insured vessels are daring to navigate the choke point. Why? Because the deterrence factor, the psychological balance of power, has fundamentally shifted. To prove that they still control the escalation ladder and to mock the U.S. territorial declaration, Iran recently executed a highly precise strategic operation. They launched 2 ballistic missiles that splashed down mere miles from the UAE coastline. This was not a misfire. This was not a targeting error. This was a calculated demonstration. It was a signal to the global shipping insurance markets that the Iranian anti-access area denial umbrella, the infamous A2AD network, is fully, perfectly operational. The diplomatic rhetoric surrounding this event has reached an absolute boiling point. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi delivered a meticulously calculated statement, directly challenging Washington on the world stage. He stated, and I quote, "Soon his delusion regarding the Strait of Hormuz will either be corrected, or we will correct the delusions of this deluded man." These are not just empty diplomatic talking points meant for domestic consumption. They are a statement of strategic, kinetic intent. But the true, underlying genius of this Iranian operation is not the missiles themselves. It is the asymmetric financial drain it creates for Washington. The U.S. Navy is currently burning millions of dollars every single day just to keep the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group pinned down in one of the most constrained, geographically hazardous waterways on the planet. Operating an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf is a tactical nightmare. The waters are shallow, the maneuverability is strictly limited, and the littoral shorelines are entirely dominated by the adversary. The U.S. Navy is effectively playing the role of a maritime traffic cop in a neighborhood where every single cliff and cave is potentially hostile. Iran, on the other hand, is achieving a near-total global supply chain blockade at essentially zero cost. All they have to do is keep cheap, easily hidden, highly mobile coastal missile batteries on standby. They do not even need to fire them constantly. The psychological threat alone is enough to freeze the global energy market and force the U.S. to keep its most expensive assets anchored in a kill zone. We have seen this exact geopolitical paradigm before. We must look back more than 2 millennia to the Peloponnesian War. The untouchable, culturally dominant naval superpower of Athens launched the disastrous Sicilian expedition. They overextended their magnificent, wildly expensive fleet to control a distant, hostile geographic choke point. The Athenians believed that their sheer technological brilliance and numerical superiority would guarantee a swift, decisive victory. Instead, they were bogged down, politically humiliated, and bled dry by a localized enemy practicing early asymmetric warfare. The grand Athenian fleet was trapped in the harbor of Syracuse, unable to maneuver, picked apart by a deeply entrenched adversary that simply outweighed them. Are we watching a modern-day Sicilian expedition unfold in the Persian Gulf right now? By forcing the U.S. to anchor its premier naval assets in the Middle East to guard oil tankers, Iran is accomplishing a strategic miracle for its allies. They are leaving the Indo-Pacific, the actual center of gravity for the 21st century, wide open. In Beijing, the leadership watches gleefully as the U.S. Navy exhausts its operational readiness, its maintenance cycles, and its crew morale. All the while, China is quietly, methodically securing massively discounted, overland energy supplies directly from Russia and Iran. Beijing is completely bypassing the very maritime choke points that the U.S. is currently going bankrupt trying to protect. It is a masterclass in grand strategy. But the drain is not merely financial. It is intensely, undeniably material. And this brings us to the second, far more terrifying development that is breaking right now. 6 months into this grinding, relentless conflict, devastating leaks from deep within defense sources have confirmed a mathematical nightmare for the Pentagon. The U.S. military has exhausted nearly its entire stockpile of long-range precision missiles. Let that sink in for a moment. The great arsenal of democracy, the industrial foundation of the Western world, is effectively running on empty. For half a year, Iran and their deeply entrenched Houthi proxies have been launching relentless daily waves of unmanned aerial systems. These are not highly sophisticated, stealthy, fifth-generation weapons. They are $20,000 munitions, often manufactured with commercial-grade electronics and powered by simple lawnmower engines. Yet, they are deadly enough to command an immediate response. Just within the last 12 hours, one of these unidentified, mass-produced projectiles successfully bypassed defensive screens and crippled a commercial ship near Oman, resulting in deeply tragic crew casualties. To defend against these incoming endless swarms, the U.S. Navy is being forced into a physically impossible mathematical equation. They are firing irreplaceable, exquisitely engineered, $2 million SM-2 interceptor missiles to neutralize $20,000 drones. You do not need a degree in advanced macroeconomic theory to see precisely how this ends. The U.S. defense industrial base, plagued by supply chain bottlenecks, rare earth material shortages, and a lack of skilled manufacturing labor, physically cannot manufacture replacement interceptors fast enough to keep pace with Iran's rapid mass production capabilities. The situation on the ground is deteriorating rapidly. U.S. troops deployed in the region are now actively, desperately raising the alarm to their senior military leadership. They are reporting severe critical shortages in localized base defenses, interceptor reloads, and even essential medical supplies. The vast logistical tail that sustains the American empire is fraying at the edges. Yet, the political narrative in Washington remains deeply, dangerously disconnected from the grim reality on the ground. When confronted with this catastrophic supply shortage, U.S. President Donald Trump downplayed the systemic crisis, stating defensively, quote, "vast resupplies being made." He projected total confidence, despite independent intelligence sources and defense contractors overwhelmingly confirming a critical, highly dangerous lack of long-range interceptor availability. But ask yourself, how long can an empire pretend it has ammunition when the silos are hollow? Think about the profound historical parallel here. Look at the Soviet Union's disastrous overstretch in Afghanistan during the 1980s. The world watched in awe as a global superpower slowly bled its domestic economy, its industrial base, and its elite military reserves dry in an attempt to fight a decentralized, highly motivated, deeply entrenched enemy. The Soviets continually deployed high-end, profoundly expensive technology like their Hind helicopter gunships and massive armored columns against an adversary that relied on cheap, easily replaceable asymmetric weapons. The financial, logistical, and psychological bleeding eventually shattered the Soviet Empire from the inside out. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Who is the true, ultimate architect of this modern exhaustion strategy? This scenario is exactly, flawlessly what Xi Jinping wants. This is the grand strategic trap unfolding in plain sight. The high-end, long-range precision missiles that the U.S. is currently wasting in the vast deserts and littoral waters of the Middle East are the exact same specialized munitions critically required for a potential Taiwan Strait contingency. You simply cannot fight a high-intensity Pacific war against a peer adversary if your vertical launch magazines are empty. Iran is not just fighting for regional hegemony in the Middle East. They are single-handedly disarming the U.S. Pacific Command on China's behalf, and they are doing it using weapons that cost less than a civilian automobile. As the military is systematically bled of its physical resources, the political leadership itself is being targeted, not just with potential kinetic action, but with profound, destabilizing psychological warfare. This leads us to the third and perhaps most structurally damaging fracture in the Western alliance. Over the last 12 hours, a massive, highly sensitive intelligence rupture has spilled violently into the public view. It has exposed a deep, intensely bitter, and perhaps irreparable rift between the U.S. and Israel. According to leaked reports from Reuters intelligence sources, Israel delivered a dire, urgent warning to Washington regarding an active, localized plot engineered by Iranian proxies. The intelligence firmly suggested an imminent, highly credible attempt to shoot down Air Force One over the airspace of Turkey using an advanced, shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missile. The threat matrix was taken so incredibly seriously by the security apparatus that the U.S. president had to be secretly, humiliatingly smuggled onto a decoy aircraft. The leader of the free world, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in human history, literally loaded onto a transport plane via a commercial catering truck, just to ensure his physical survival. The psychological indignity and the optical weakness of this moment cannot be overstated. But the diplomatic fallout is even worse than the optics. The CIA is now publicly, aggressively pushing back against their closest regional ally. In an unprecedented move, U.S. intelligence agencies have stated they have low confidence in Israel's threat assessment. They are effectively, publicly accusing their deeply trusted partner of exaggerating the threat matrix in order to manipulate U.S. foreign policy and drag Washington deeper into a regional conflict. We are witnessing a visibly fractured Western alliance that cannot even agree on the fundamental reality of the threat level staring them in the face. The response from Jerusalem was swift, sharp, and deeply revealing. An Israeli embassy spokesperson lashed out at the CIA's dismissals, stating with palpable frustration, quote, "The same people who claim that Israel is trying to influence U.S. policy would just as soon accuse Israel of concealing critical information. This is the ultimate crowning asymmetric victory for Tehran. The psychological and logistical toll on Washington is mathematically staggering. By forcing the U.S. military and Secret Service to constantly alter the president's movements, deploy elaborate multi-million-dollar decoys, completely reroute flight paths, and scramble heavy air assets over localized proxy threats, Iran is demanding a staggering diversion of diplomatic and security resources. They are controlling the schedule of the U.S. president without firing a single shot. This mirrors the terrifying Archduke Franz Ferdinand paradigm of 1914, the sheer, suffocating paranoia of an asymmetric assassination plot threatens to snap the delicate historical intelligence trust between foundational allies. It creates an environment of total suspicion where one wrong move, one miscalculated intelligence report, or one defensive diplomatic statement risks a chaotic, uncoordinated plunge into a wider regional kinetic operation. When allies no longer trust each other's data, the alliance ceases to function as a deterrent. By wedging themselves perfectly, surgically between the US and Israel, Tehran has created total strategic paralysis in Washington. The US policy apparatus is now spending more time arguing internally about the validity of the threat than it is actually countering the threat. And as the West argues bitterly with itself, paralyzed by paranoia and empty magazines, Russia capitalizes beautifully. Moscow is now projecting itself across the global South and the Middle East as the only stable, rational, reliable diplomatic broker left in the region. They are stepping into the power vacuum created by American exhaustion and Israeli-American friction. We are watching the absolute classical components of imperial collapse play out in real time right before our eyes. The catastrophic overextension of the premier naval fleet in a narrow choke point like Hormuz, the sheer bankruptcy of the military-industrial complex through the brutal mathematics of asymmetric drone warfare, and the deeply corrosive internal paranoia that turns long-standing historical allies against each other in the dark. If an empire cannot protect its commercial ships, if it cannot afford to fire its defensive weapons, and if it can no longer trust its closest friends, how much longer can it truly claim to rule the world? If you want to stay ahead of the mainstream narrative, understand the true mathematical mechanics of global power, and never be caught off guard by the shifting world order, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, and I will see you in the next analysis.